Go 1099, what's good, y'all? This video, I wanted to talk about something that I feel like need to be addressed. My opponent, he actually is the main reason why I'm doing this video. He actually reached out to me to sort of give or shed light on this particular issue, and I figure I'll go over it and talk about where the flaws in this approach stems from. Now, what I'm talking about is players that go on the ranked and their main game plan is to just use the jab for the majority of the fight, whether it be to set up certain things, which most likely is always the main tactic. They just throw jab after jab, usually doubling up on the jab, and the second that your block is lower, that they feel like they can have a visual cue to know your block is low, they'll try to throw out an additional attack, an additional strike, as you see right there, like the spinning back fist, or the spinning back kick, the OP one that everybody says is just crazy overpowered, which I agree, because that kick can catch you no matter where you move your head. You kind of have to slip in or sidestep that strike to completely make it miss. Otherwise, you're just playing a very risky game. But yes, the jab is something that I notice a lot of players using, and I always advocate that you should have a good jab. It usually helps you with being able to control the pacing of the fight, and it helps you set up other attacks and combinations that can put you in better position to win the rounds and win the fight. But when you have players that just rely on the jab, almost as if it's their main, their main source of damage, that's where the issue lies. Now, my opponent right here, using Jerry, he reached out to me after this fight and gave me his explanation on why he had this particular approach in this fight. Now, he said that he had to deal with players constantly just abusing the jab merely just to break the block per se. And I'm pretty sure they use it to fire off like 4 or 5 piece combinations, or use it to throw off that spinning back fist that usually always lands through the block after you get like 3 or 4 in. And he was frustrated, so what he wanted to do was he wanted to take it out on the next player, which happened to be me. Now, me knowing by the second round, I already knew what his main approach was, which was to just use a jab heavy and try to fire off attacks off of about 4 jabs. So if you've been watching this fighter so far, you'll notice that every time he started an attack, is usually 9 times out of 10 always that double jab, or he'll throw a jab to try to switch his timing up. But mainly he just threw jabs and Hail Mary spinning back fist every now and then once he felt like my block was compromised enough to try to sneak another shot in. Now, the player, he let me know that it was out of frustration that he chose this approach, because he had to deal with other players spamming that he was facing. And this is something that EA allows for. EA does allow for players to use this tactic to deal off heavy damage, especially against players that don't know how to deal with pressure too much. So they tend to back up, and backing up, as I say, is the worst thing that you can do when you're dealing with somebody who's just moving forward, throwing strikes. Now, in this situation, my opponent is just throwing jabs. So the best way to combat that is just to punish them every time that they miss on those jabs. The main tip that I can give to this player and players that go through the same thing is hand with players using jabs to try to break, the block, to try to get off, bigger shots to a compromised opponent, or frame trap, whatever you want to call it. Is that once they close the distance with that jab, it's in your advantage too to deal damage. You can't just stand there and allow them to reset, as they get closer in, because you already know what their game plan is. In this situation, me using John Jones, every time he missed off of that jab trying to close distance, I use the teeps, I use, the oblique kicks, the leg kicks, and the straights to intercept him, and it was very effective. The big thing, though, is that you don't have to play the jab game with your opponent if that's their main approach. Just simply, finding your range and building up your damage throughout the fight is good enough. Because one thing's for sure, the player who has a high arsenal of offense will always beat the player that's strictly just trying to damage their opponent's block for the sake of getting one, Hail Mary strike in at a give him a rock or a knockdown. And not only, is it bad to feed into the styles that frustrate you when they're unrealistic, it's rarely to never going to work against any elite player. And all it'll do, even if you do gather wins, is just take the enjoyment of the game out of it.